June 6, 1944, 0520 hours, Coastal Observation Post, Port-en-Bessin, Normandy. The salty air, thick with the damp chill of the English Channel, clings to the concrete walls of the observation bunker. Through the narrow slit, the world is a smear of grey sea, melting into a grey pre-dawn sky. A lone seagull cries, its call lost in the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore below. Inside, the air is stale, tasting of cold coffee and nervous tension. Major Werner Pluskat of the 352nd Artillery Regiment's 1st Battalion rubs his eyes, the fatigue a physical weight upon his shoulders. He'd been roused from a fitful sleep hours earlier by the incessant drone of aircraft engines, a sound that had every man on the coast on edge. Regimental command had dismissed it as just another heavy bombing raid, but this felt different. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a deeper, more menacing hum. He raises the heavy Zeiss binoculars to his eyes, the cold metal a shock against his skin. He pans slowly across the horizon, the powerful lenses cutting through the morning mist. At first, there is nothing but the familiar churning of the sea. Then he freezes. His knuckles whiten as he grips the binoculars. There is a shape out there, a ghost. No, not one, dozens. Then hundreds. He blinks, convinced his tired eyes are deceiving him, creating phantom ships from the shadows and the waves. He wipes the lenses with the sleeve of his uniform and looks again. His stomach plummets. It is not a phantom fleet. Silhouetted against the lightning eastern sky is a forest of masts and funnels, a city of steel floating on the water. Ship after ship after ship, stretching from one end of the horizon to the other. The sheer scale of it is impossible, a grotesque fantasy. He counts landing craft, destroyers, cruisers, and even the hulking shapes of battleships further out. The sea is black with them. A frantic energy seizes him. He scrambles for the field telephone, his hand shaking as he cranks the handle. The line crackles to life. Corps headquarters, this is Pluskat. Get me the general. The voice on the other end is laced with irritation. The general is busy, Major. What is it? The invasion, it's here. It's happening now. Pluskat's voice is a strange shout. There are thousands of ships. I can see thousands of them. A pause, then weary skepticism. Are you certain, Major? The weather is terrible. Naval Command reported no possibility of an invasion for at least several days. German meteorologists, with limited data, had indeed predicted rough seas, making a landing seem highly improbable. This forecast had lulled the High Command into a false sense of security. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the charismatic commander of Army Group B, was at this very moment in Germany, celebrating his wife's birthday, confident the Allies wouldn't dare challenge the turbulent Channel. General Friedrich Dollmann, commander of the 7th Army, had even scheduled a war games exercise in Rennes, pulling his division commanders away from the front. Listen to me, Pluskat insists, his voice cracking. The entire channel is filled with ships. They are heading directly for the coast between the Vire and the Orne, right at me. The line goes quiet for a moment. Then the officer at headquarters replies with a chilling finality that underscores the deep-seated disbelief plaguing the German command. That's impossible. The Allies don't have that many ships in the entire world. Pluskat lets the receiver fall from his hand. He turns back to the observation slit, the colossal panorama of steel and menace still there, growing larger with every passing minute. Operation Neptune, the largest seaborne invasion in history, was underway. Nearly 7,000 vessels were converging on this stretch of coastline, a force so overwhelming it defied all German intelligence, all expectations, and all logic. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's boasted impregnable fortress, was about to face a tide that no wall could ever hope to contain. For the men in the bunkers, the longest day had begun not with a bang, but with a terrifying, unbelievable sight that filled the entire world. The telephone receiver dangles from its cord, swaying gently in the bunker's oppressive silence. Major Pluskat stands frozen at the observation slit, a spectator to the impossible. The words from headquarters echo in his mind. The Allies don't have that many ships in the entire world, yet the evidence of his own eyes is absolute, a crushing rebuttal to the arrogance and delusion of the High Command. The Ghost Fleet is no longer a distant silhouette. It is a living, breathing entity of smoke and steel, disgorging smaller craft like insects. The horizon has simply vanished, replaced by an endless wall of Allied naval power. 5:35 hours. Headquarters, 716th Infantry Division, Caen. The atmosphere is one of groggy confusion. General Wilhelm Richter, a veteran of the Eastern Front, stares at the map on his command table. The pins marking his units along the coast designated Sword, Juno, and Gold by an enemy he cannot yet see suddenly feel terribly isolated. Reports are trickling in, but they are chaotic and contradictory. Paratroopers landing near the Orne River Bridge, gliders spotted near Sainte-Mère-Église, and now this madman Pluskat screaming about thousands of ships. Richter's chief of staff, Colonel Hermann von Oppeln-Bronichowski, dismisses it with a wave of his hand. It is a feint, Herr General. A diversion. They want us to believe this is the main attack, to draw our panzers to the coast, while the real invasion happens at Pas-de-Calais. It is exactly as the Führer predicted. This was the accepted wisdom, the strategic dogma that had been drilled into every commander in the West. The Allies would strike at the narrowest point of the Channel, at Calais, where the V-1 rocket sites threatened London. Everything else was a sideshow. The Phantom Army Group under General Patton, the fake radio traffic, the double agents, all of it had painted a convincing picture. This morning's chaos felt like the final act of that grand deception. But Richter is not so sure. The sheer number of airborne reports troubles him. They are too widespread, too coordinated for a simple diversion. He picks up a telephone. Get me the 84th Corps. 0550 hours. St. Lo headquarters, 84th Corps. General Erich Marx listens intently on the other end of the line. A one-legged veteran of staggering courage, Marx is known for his sharp, intuitive grasp of the battlefield. Unlike many of his peers, he has never fully subscribed to the Calais theory. He has walked the beaches of Normandy himself, studied the tides, and felt a gnawing unease about the peninsula's vulnerability. The reports flooding his headquarters are painting a terrifying picture. Pluskat's frantic call was just the beginning. Now, observation posts all along the Calvados coast are screaming the same thing. Eine riesige Flotte, an enormous fleet. The reports are so consistent, so filled with genuine panic, that they begin to override the ingrained skepticism. Richter, Marx says, his voice steady but laced with a new urgency. What is your assessment of the fleet's size? My artillery officer, Pluskat, he claims it is endless. He says it fills the sea from horizon to horizon. Another officer in Marx's command bunker scoffs audibly. The morning haze plays tricks on the eyes, Herr General. But Marx silences him with a glare. He remembers a conversation he'd had with Rommel weeks earlier. The field marshal had been adamant. The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive, Rommel had said, pacing restlessly. For the Allies, as well as for Germany, it will be the longest day. Now, with Rommel hundreds of miles away and the Panzer Divisions held in reserve by Hitler's personal order, Marx feels a cold dread creep into his heart. The Führer alone could release the armoured reserves, and he was still asleep at the Berghof, with strict orders not to be disturbed. Suddenly, a new sound joins the distant drone of aircraft, a low, guttural rumble that travels not through the air, but through the very earth itself. It grows in intensity, a deep-throated roar that vibrates the coffee cups on the tables and makes the glass in the window frames tremble. It is the sound of hundreds of tons of high explosives being loaded into the breeches of the largest naval guns ever assembled. From the battleships USS Nevada, USS Arkansas, and HMS Warspite, cannons designed to sink other battleships are elevating their barrels, their targets not ships at sea, but the concrete and steel of the Atlantic Wall. The endless fleet was about to speak. 0555 hours. Widerstands Nest 62, Omaha Beach Sector. The guttural rumble becomes a physical blow. The world does not explode. It tears itself apart. For the young grenadiers of the 716th Infantry Division, hunkered down in their concrete and earth fortifications, the Atlantic Wall ceases to be a fortress and becomes a tomb. The sound is a solid entity, a physical pressure that ruptures eardrums and liquefies nerves. It is the synchronized fury of hundreds of naval guns, from the nimble 5-inch cannons of destroyers to the house-sized 16-inch shells of the battleships. A shell from HMS Warspite screams overhead, an invisible freight train in the sky. and impacts a casemate 100 meters down the beach. The concrete emplacement, designed to withstand bombs, vanishes in a geyser of earth, smoke, and pulverized cement. The shockwave hits the trench like a fist, throwing men against the walls and filling the air with a choking dust that tastes of cordite and death. Inside the command bunker at WN62, the lights flicker and die, plunging the officers into a terrifying, vibrating darkness. Communications are the first casualty. The meticulously laid telephone lines to regimental headquarters are shredded in the first salvo. A runner sent to a neighboring strongpoint disappears in a cloud of shrapnel before he has taken 10 steps. The individual bunkers and machine gun nests are now islands, deaf and blind, utterly alone in a sea of apocalyptic noise. They can do nothing but endure, praying that the reinforced concrete above their heads holds, listening to the shrieking crescendo of each incoming round, a sound that ends either in the dull thud of a near miss or the instantaneous oblivion of a direct hit. 0610 hours. St. Lo, Headquarters, 84th Corps. The ground itself is bucking. General Marks grips the edge of his command table to steady himself. The maps, the pins, the neat lines of command, they are all rendered meaningless by this primeval violence. The sheer, unholy weight of the bombardment is a message in itself. This is not a feint. This is not a diversion. This is annihilation. This is Schwerpunkt, the focal point of the main attack. Every instinct he has, honed over years of brutal warfare, screams it at him. "Get me the 21st Panzer Division," he orders, his voice raw. "Tell Feuchtinger to move his tanks toward Caen. Now." An operations officer, pale-faced, shakes his head. "Herr General, we cannot. The division is under the operational control of Army Group B. They cannot be released without an order from Field Marshal Rommel or from OKW, and Rommel is in Germany. OKW, the High Command of the Armed Forces, in Berchtesgaden, where Hitler still sleeps. The panzers, the one weapon that could drive the invaders back into the sea before they established a foothold, are chained by bureaucracy. They sit in their assembly areas miles from the coast, their engines cold, waiting for a word that may never come. Marks feels a surge of impotent rage. He is a general with a sword arm, but no sword. He is tasked with defending this coast, yet the very tools he needs are locked away in a box to which he has no key. 0625 hours, Port-en-Bessin. Major Pluskat, who had first witnessed the impossible fleet, is now a witness to its wrath. The earth shudders beneath him. Through his binoculars, he watches the coastline he is meant to defend being systematically erased. Plumes of black smoke and brown earth erupt in a continuous, rolling barrage. The Atlantic Wall, that great symbol of German strength, is being cracked open like an egg. He can see the landing craft now, circling in their designated patterns like sharks, waiting for the moment to strike. The bombardment is not random, it has a terrifying purpose. It is designed to stun, to kill, to demoralize, and to clear the way. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the shelling shifts. The thunderous impacts move inland, a creeping barrage aimed at targets further behind the beaches. An eerie silence descends, broken only by the crackle of distant fires and the ringing in the ears of the survivors. The men in the bunkers slowly, cautiously raise their heads from cover. They stumble to their observation slits and machine gun ports, their faces caked in grime and blood. They peer out through the smoke-choked air towards the sea, and what they see is a new kind of hell. The bombardment is over because the next phase has begun. The endless fleet has delivered its payload. A solid line of landing craft, their steel ramps dropping like jaws, is grinding onto the sand, and from their bellies pours an endless tide of men. 0640 hours. Machine gun nest, Colleville-sur-Mer, Omaha sector. The smoke and dust from the naval bombardment still hang heavy in the air, a gritty fog that stings the eyes and coats the tongue. For Lieutenant Franz Schreiber, peering over the blistering hot barrel of his MG-42 machine gun, the scene below is a grotesque, slow-motion nightmare. The Allied landing craft, hundreds of them, have vomited their contents onto the shingle. A human tide, khaki green and burdened with weapons and gear, is struggling through the surf, directly into the interlocking fields of fire he and his men have meticulously prepared for months. He screams an order that is lost in the cacophony of explosions and rifle fire. His gunner, a boy of 19 with fear-widened eyes, squeezes the trigger. The MG-42 rips into life, its terrifying, unique sound like canvas being torn at 1,000 revolutions per minute. At this range, it is impossible to miss. Across the beach, dozens of other machine guns and mortars join the slaughter. The first wave of Americans falters, men falling in the blood-tinged surf, their bodies tossed about by the waves like driftwood. The water turns red. For a fleeting moment, a savage sense of victory courses through Schreiber. The Atlantic Wall is holding. They are driving the invaders back, but the moment is a lie. For every man that falls, two more seem to take his place, scrambling over the dead and dying, using bodies for cover. Landing craft that are hit and burning are simply bypassed by others. Destroyers move perilously close to shore, blasting his position with their 5-inch guns. The explosions walking up the bluffs toward his emplacement. The sheer, inexhaustible number of them is what breaks the mind. It is not a battle, it is an exorcism of men, and he is on the wrong side. 0730 hours, La Roche-Guyon. Headquarters, Army Group B. Field Marshal Rommel is on the road, racing back toward France from his home in Herlingen, utterly unaware of the catastrophe unfolding. In his absence, his chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, stares at the operations map in stunned disbelief. The pins representing enemy landings are no longer a few scattered points. They form a solid rash across the entire bay of the Seine. The 709th Division at Utah, the 716th at Omaha, Gold and Juneau, the 711th near Sword Beachell are screaming for help. The phone rings. It is General Marx from the 84th Corps. His voice is stripped of all formality, raw with desperation. Speidel, the beachhead is solidifying. My regiments are being bled white. I must have the 21st Panzer. I need them now, before the enemy can get their anti-tank guns ashore. Speidel feels a cold knot of dread in his stomach. He knows Marx is right, but his hands are tied. I have already requested their release from OKW, he says, the words tasting like ash. They have refused. The Führer has not yet been woken. All Panzer divisions are to be held until he gives the order. It is a moment of supreme, tragic absurdity. The decisive battle for the fate of Europe is being fought, and the most powerful weapons on the German side are paralyzed because one man is asleep. Speidel imagines the tanks of the 21st Panzer Division just south of Caen, their crews waiting, listening to the thunder of a battle they are forbidden to join. He has no authority to override the order. No one does. 0800 hours. Near Caen, Command Post 21st Panzer Division. General Edgar Feuchtinger paces like a caged animal. He can see the smoke. He can feel the vibrations of the naval guns through the soles of his boots. His reconnaissance units have reported British paratroopers seizing the bridges over the Ornea dagger aimed at his flank. And from the coast, the reports are of a full-scale invasion. Yet he has received only one definitive order. Do nothing. His operations officer approaches. Herr General, 84th Corps is screaming for a counter-attack towards the coast, but Army Group B confirms we are not to move without direct orders from the Führer's headquarters. Feuchtinger slams his fist on the radio set. So we are to sit here and do nothing while they land the entire British army on our doorstep. The German plan had always been to meet the invasion on the beaches, to throw them back into the sea with a swift, brutal, armored thrust. It was the core of Rommel's strategy. Now that strategy is being strangled by the very command structure it was meant to serve. Every minute that passes, more Allied soldiers, more tanks, more artillery are pouring onto the Normandy soil. The chance for a decisive blow is slipping away, lost in a fog of indecision and incompetence hundreds of miles from the front. The shock of the endless fleet was now being replaced by the agonizing paralysis of their own chains of command. 10 hours. The Berghof, Obersalzberg, Bavarian Alps. While the Normandy coast is being torn apart by steel and fire, here 800 miles away, the air is crisp and clean. Sunlight glints off the snow-capped peaks surrounding Hitler's mountain retreat. Inside, Generals Alfred Jodl and Wilhelm Keitel, the two most powerful military officers in the Reich, are trapped in a state of suspended animation. For hours they have stared at the reports from France, their mounting terror matched only by their fear of waking the Führer. To disturb him before his customary late-morning awakening was a sin punishable by career-ending, if not life-ending, wrath. Finally, with the news from the front growing more apocalyptic by the minute, the decision is made. They enter the Führer's study. Hitler, still dressed in his nightclothes, listens to the initial reports with a strange, almost serene calm. His reaction is not one of panic, but of vindication. "So it has begun," he says, a thin smile playing on his lips, "just where we expected it. But this," he gestures dismissively at the map of Normandy, "this is the diversion. The real attack is still to come at Calais. They are trying to lure our panzers away from the true prize." Jodl and Keitel exchange a fleeting, nervous glance. The sheer scale of the Normandy landings screams otherwise. But to contradict the Führer's intuition is unthinkable. "We must hold the Panzer Divisions in reserve for Calais, my Führer," Keitel affirms, his voice a hollow echo of Hitler's own conviction. But even Hitler cannot ignore the pleas of the commanders on the ground entirely. After further reports, he relents, but only partially. He gives Jodl the authority to release the 21st Panzer Division to Army Group B. However, the powerful Panzer Lehr Division and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, both positioned for a decisive counterthrust, are to remain under his personal command. He will not be tricked. He will wait for the real invasion. The decision, when it finally comes, is not a strategic masterstroke, but a grudging concession delivered hours too late. 14:30 hours, near Caen. The order, having travelled from the serene mountains of Bavaria through layers of command, finally reaches General Feuchtinger. 6 hours. 6 hours of the best daylight, 6 hours during which the enemy has consolidated their fragile foothold, landed artillery, anti-tank guns, and their own tanks. The rage Feuchtinger felt that morning has cooled into a grim, determined fury. Panzer IV. The command ripples through the assembly areas. The ground trembles as the engines of over 100 Panzer IV tanks and assault guns roar to life. Columns of SDKFZ 251 half-tracks, packed with Panzer Grenadiers, churn up the dirt roads. The 21st Panzer Division, Rommel's ghost division from the desert, is finally on the move. Their objective, to smash through the British infantry north of Caen, drive a wedge between the British and Canadian beachheads at Sword and Juno, and push all the way to the sea. At first, the attack is a textbook example of German armoured doctrine. The panzers, with their infantry in close support, slam into the British 3rd Infantry Division. The lightly armed British airborne troops who had seized the bridges that morning are forced back. Villages that had been liberated only hours before are once again filled with the clatter of German tank treads. The counterattack gains momentum. It seems, for a moment, that the tide might be turned. 16:45 hours. A ridge overlooking the coast near Lyon-sur-Mer. Colonel Hermann von Oppeln-Bronikowski, leading the main armoured thrust, brings his Panzer IV to a halt at the crest of a small hill. Below him lies the English Channel. They have done it. They have broken through. A surge of elation floods him. Then he looks through his binoculars, and the elation dies, replaced by a profound, soul-crushing shock that mirrors what Major Pluskat felt in the pre-dawn gloom. The sea is not empty. It is not even just crowded. It is a solid, unending mass of ships. Hundreds upon hundreds of them, from tiny landing craft to mighty cruisers, sit with an arrogant calm just offshore. And the guns of that fleet are turning toward him. Before he can even give an order, a sound like the tearing of the sky fills the air. It is the fire control radar of the Royal Navy locking onto his panzers. A salvo from the cruiser HMS Orion lands among his lead tanks. A Panzer IV simply ceases to exist, its turret thrown 100 feet into the air. The ground erupts in fountains of dirt and steel. Simultaneously, dug-in British 17-pounder anti-tank guns, perfectly positioned by an enemy who had hours to prepare, open up from the flanks. The satisfying punch of a panzer being hit is followed by the terrifying bloom of an internal fire. The unstoppable armoured spearhead grinds to a halt, caught in a perfectly laid trap, hammered by overwhelming firepower from both land and sea. They are not fighting an army. They are fighting a floating industrial nation. The illusion of control has vanished in a storm of high explosive shells. 2100 hours, La Roche-Guyon, Headquarters, Army Group B. The long shadows of the evening stretch across the French countryside, but inside the chateau, the atmosphere is thick with the gloom of defeat. The maps on the tables tell a story of unmitigated disaster. The pins representing Allied positions are no longer clinging precariously to the coastline. They mark deep established lodgements. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword, 5 solid beachheads. The counterattack of the 21st Panzer Division, which had begun with such ferocity, has been fought to a bloody standstill. Opel Bronikovsky's tanks, battered by naval gunfire and dug-in anti-tank guns, are withdrawing under the cover of darkness, having lost a significant portion of their strength for no strategic gain. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel finally arrives, his face a mask of exhaustion and fury after a frantic day-long drive from Germany. He strides into the command center, his presence silencing the low murmur of conversation. He doesn't need to ask for a summary. The grim faces of his staff and the damning reality of the operations map tell him everything. General Speidel provides the briefing, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. The landings are on a far greater scale than ever anticipated. We estimate 5 infantry divisions are ashore, with elements of 3 airborne divisions inland. All attempts at a concerted counterattack have failed. The 21st Panzer is heavily engaged. The Panzer Lehr and 12th SS are still not released to our command. Rommel listens, his jaw tight. "And the fleet?" he asks, his voice dangerously quiet. An intelligence officer steps forward, his hands trembling slightly as he holds his report. "Field Marshal, the initial estimates were flawed. Photo reconnaissance and forward observer reports from this afternoon confirm at least 6 battleships, over 20 cruisers, 100 destroyers, and a total vessel count approaching 7,000. They have put more men and material on the beaches in 12 hours than we thought possible in a month." Rommel walks to the map, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. He stares at the solid blue arrows pushing inland, symbols of an overwhelming force that he had predicted, that he had warned them about, but that no one had truly believed possible. He had begged for control of the Panzer divisions, pleaded to have them stationed closer to the coast where they could strike the invaders in the first, most vulnerable hours. Instead, they had been held back by a fantasy, by the Führer's obsession with a phantom attack at Calais. He turns to his staff, his eyes blazing with a cold fire that contains the full weight of the day's catastrophe. "The longest day," he says, the words more a curse than a statement. He is not just looking at a failed military operation, he is looking at the beginning of the end. He knows, with the chilling certainty of a master strategist, that once the Allies have consolidated a foothold of this magnitude, with this level of naval and air support, they can never be thrown back into the sea. The Atlantic Wall has not just been breached, it has been rendered irrelevant. The shock that Major Pluskat felt, seeing the Phantom Fleet in the mists of dawn, has now fully permeated the German High Command. It is no longer just the shock of seeing so many ships. It is the deeper, more terrifying shock of realization, a realization that their intelligence had failed, their strategy was flawed, their leadership was paralyzed, and that they were now facing an enemy whose industrial might and logistical capacity defied their entire understanding of warfare. The Endless Fleet was not just an invasion force, it was a symptom of a power so vast that it would inevitably grind the Third Reich into dust. For the German generals in Normandy, the sun was setting not just on June 6, 1944, but on their war.